Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us this evening. The NATO Military Committee has just drawn to a close. We will have opening statements by the Chair of the NATO Military Committee, Admiral Bauer, and the Chief of Defense of the Czech Armed Forces, General Rehka. I apologize, sir. We will hear first from Admiral Bauer. Sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, the NATO Military Committee is honored to have been so warmly received despite the heavy rains in the beautiful Czech Republic. We're grateful to our hosts for bringing us here together at such a crucial time for our alliance. Today, the NATO military authorities discussed the two Herculean tasks that we need to undertake simultaneously. While continuing and ramping up our support to Ukraine, we must also bolster our own deterrence and defense. Over the past year, we have made huge strides in making NATO's new defense plans fully executable. NATO now has 500,000 troops on high readiness. We established the Allied Reaction Force. We are adapting our command and control structure, and allies are rapidly developing and expanding their capabilities. Training and exercises play a key role in that. This year, the alliance held its largest collective defense exercise since the Cold War, Steadfast Defender. Over 90,000 troops from across the alliance exercised in Germany, Poland, and the 3 Baltic states. This demonstrates that a new era of collective defense is upon us, and NATO is stronger and readier than ever. But the responsibility for freedom does not rest on the shoulders of those in uniform alone. Today, the Chiefs of Defense discussed the fact that strong deterrence requires strong societal resilience. It requires a whole-of-society approach with a keen role for the private sector. Not only our defense industries, but our whole economies need to realize that peace is no longer a given. Private businesses, too, have a role to play in deterrence and defense. Because while it may be the military who wins battles, it is the economies that win war. War is a whole-of-society event. Nowhere is that more visible than in Ukraine. This past year, we have yet again seen the inspiring tenacity and valor of the Ukrainian armed forces as they demonstrate their military prowess. Every inch of territory they maintain and retain reflects the power and bravery of the Ukrainian people in fighting against a power who seeks to divide them. The historic decisions made in the Washington summit reflect NATO's pledge to support them in their rightful claim for freedom and sovereignty. We're working hard on the launch of the NATO security assistance and training for Ukraine. This includes a command in Germany and logistic hubs in the eastern part of the alliance, which will involve around 700 personnel. NATO will take up a greater coordinating role in the support for Ukraine. This marks an investment in our collective future, ensuring Ukraine's support for the long haul, and another step towards having the Ukrainian flag in front of the NATO headquarters. Ladies and gentlemen, in an increasingly divided world, there is no weapon more powerful than our unity. This meeting today serves to convey a message to the citizens of our alliance that we are working tirelessly to protect our way of life, our values, our security. In order to do that, we must bolster our deterrence. Preparedness preserves peace. Preparedness prevents conflicts. The 3.5 million men and women in uniform who serve our great alliance have no task more sacred than that. But it's a task for all of us, for every single member of society. Collective defense is truly a task for the collective. And above all, it demonstrates that there is no stronger weapon in the world than our unity. General Rehka, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So also good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I have to say it was a great pleasure to be a host of this military committee conference. It was also a great privilege for me as a Czech Chief of Defense to be able to host all allied chiefs of defense in Prague for the first time. So for us, this was also very symbolic because not only Alliance celebrated 75 years of its existence this year, but also for us Czechs, this is important since this is our 25th year or 25 years of our membership in NATO. And that's very significant. The NATO has still large support in our society, and we realized that NATO is the reason that brought unprecedented security, but also prosperity to our country. So it was a great privilege. For me, as a Czech Chief of Defense, this was really important, as is always every military committee. That's the top level of my interaction with the Alliance. And for me particularly, there were three topics very interesting and important in our discussions today. One was support to Ukraine, since my country is heavily supporting Ukraine from the very beginning of this large-scale invasion and war. Also, our military is heavily involved in supporting Ukraine, both by providing training and consultations, but also by providing military equipment. And therefore, this is always an important topic for us. Then the second topic I would highlight was hybrid activities and hybrid threats from the Russian Federation, because we assessed that the number of different hybrid activities and the overall trend is worrying. And that's a challenge not only for military, it's a challenge for the whole society. Most of the acts are not in the area of military responsibilities, but it has a direct impact on our ability to execute our defense plans and to function as a military. So that was also important discussion. And the third one, for me personally, was important was the outcomes and implementation of the outcomes of the last NATO summit, especially in regards to executability of regional plans and the NATO force model, since majority of Czech military takes part in the NATO force model. They're part of these regional plans, and everything we do basically that our own defense plans revision, trying to speed up the modernization of our forces and all the training and planning is basically aimed to provide a effective contribution to those plans and our collective defense. So that was an important discussion for me. And I would stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, General. Thank you, Admiral. We will now move into questions. Kindly state your name and outlet, please. Go ahead.
Hi, Lolita Ballamore with the Associated Press. This is for both of you, if you'd like to answer. I'm wondering if there is any consensus among the military chiefs about whether or not Ukraine could and should be able to strike deeper into Russia with long-range weapons. And is there any concerns among your countries about the threats that Russia has made in terms of retaliation, if there is any move to do that?
Okay. So there's two things here. One, in accordance with the law of armed conflict, it is every nation that is attacked has the right to defend itself. And that right doesn't stop at the border of your own nation. So you are actually in line with, in accordance with that law of armed conflict, you are allowed to attack the nation that attacks you. And you normally do that in military terms. You do that because you want to weaken the enemy that attacks you in order to not only fight the arrows that come your way, but also attack the archer that is, as we see, very often operating from Russia proper into Ukraine. So militarily, there's a good reason to do that, to weaken the enemy, to weaken its logistic lines, fuel, ammunition that comes to the front. That is what you want to stop, if at all possible. So there is a good military reason why you should do that. There is a legal ground to do that. And that is the one side of the discussion. The other side of the discussion is, if nations give weapon systems to Ukraine, it is their right as well to have certain limitations in the use of those weapons, because they feel responsible for those weapons. And that is a political discussion, and that is what happens, and where some nations have a different opinion. But if you ask me as a military man, is it possible? The answer is yes.
So I'll probably just repeat what Admiral Bauer said. I fully agree. I think it's perfectly legitimate and legal to strike, for Ukrainians to strike to the targets on the Russian territory, providing it's in line with international law and law of armed conflict. I myself mentioned it a few times publicly, and also that's a decision of the Czech Republic that whatever weaponry we provide to Ukrainians, we don't put any restrictions. We believe that the Ukrainians should decide themselves how to use it. On the other side, as was mentioned, militarily it makes perfect sense, and every honest military advice will probably tell you this. On the other side, there are sovereign political decisions, and it's the right of the country who provides the systems to decide. And it's important to take into consideration every aspect, you know, including the potential of escalation and other things.
Thank you. We'll move into the next question. Sir.
Some Czech television, vis-a-vis the situation in the Red Sea, and take into account the importance of the trade route through Suez Canal and the increasing attacks by the Iranian-backed Houthis, is NATO going to join the European Union in taking a proactive role in combating this threat? Thank you very much.
I have no indications that NATO is going to do that.
Okay. Go ahead. I think there's a microphone coming your way from the other side.
In recent months, the dialectic between NATO and Russia has changed. Can we talk about a change in relations between NATO and Russia in these last months, and of a worsening too?
I think the relation between NATO and Russia didn't change in the last months. It changed since 2014, when Russia annexed Crimea. That was the moment when, for example, the Russian ambassador was no longer allowed in the NATO headquarters, and the military representative was no longer allowed in the NATO military headquarters. So I think that was a big change in the relationship. We tried to be partner with Russia for 20 years as an alliance. And the behavior of Russia, not NATO, but the behavior of Russia since 2008 in Georgia, 2014 with the annexation of Crimea and the attacks in the Donbas and Luhansk region, that changed the relationship. And then even further, of course, after the full-fledged invasion in 2022. So, and since then, what NATO nations have done, but not only NATO nations, also other nations in the world, in total 50 nations in the world help Ukraine since the start of this full-fledged war in 2022 with money, non-lethal aid and lethal aid. And so now NATO, as a result of the decision in Washington by the leaders, is setting up this command in Wiesbaden, which will coordinate the training for Ukraine of their soldiers. It will coordinate all the requirements that Ukraine has to be able to defend itself, and the logistics to get everything that nations provide for Ukraine to the border of Ukraine and into Ukraine. And the last thing is that they are helping Ukraine to work on the future armed forces of Ukraine. that is the work that NATO is going to do with this NSATU. So in that sense, you could say that that doesn't maybe help the relationship with Russia, but it doesn't change the relationship per se, because NATO is still doing what is possible and allowed in international law with the UN Charter, and therefore we continue to do that.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions from the room? Okay. Thank you very much for being with us. We thank our hosts for their generous hospitality, and then we finalize the press conference. Thank you very much.
Good evening. Have a nice day.
Good evening.